体は人類を霊体ミミズから守るための警告活動を行ってらっしゃるということですね。
ビリビリを防ぐ。でも今霊体ミミズがおおでかっ。
Koji Shiraishi, a Japanese director of about 100 feature films, has put together a remarkable and distinctive body of work. He's worked in a number of genres to some extent, but primarily in horror, and he most commonly works in the areas of cosmic horror and folk horror. Most often he likes to work on small to no budget films and in the found footage style, and frequently with a faux documentary sort of approach. The best examples of his work are things like Noroi, The Curse, Occult, and the Senritsu Kaiki File Kawasugi series. Shiraishi likes to play around with some oddities, some unusual elements in his stuff. Sometimes that manifests in some extremity, some kind of demented ideas, and sometimes it's in this sort of twisted sense of humor that you can find throughout his films. One of those oddities is the alluded to and shown in the intro, the worms. You can see from the clips that, sometimes they're sort of insubstantial, sort of these vague shadows, right? Like I mentioned, the budget in some of his films is nearly non-existent, so he's not spending a bunch of money creating fantastical, well fleshed out worms or anything like that. But they're often these sort of cosmic horror existential sort of beings or devices that relate to the story in a somewhat Lovecraftian way. So I want to highlight 4 of his works that show not just creativity within the strengths of his format of choice, but also worms. First is Noroi, The Curse. This is his most well-known film and, for my money, maybe his best. A documentary filmmaker explores seemingly unrelated paranormal incidents connected by the legend of an ancient demon called the Kagutaba. Found footage, mockumentary, this is basically the general, most common style for him. It's got an odd, sort of lo-fi aesthetic to it. Sometimes, in this film specifically, not in all of them, there are these intercuts of these Japanese TV shows that have been pre-recorded in this assembly of footage. There's also a specifically memorable character, Mitsuo Hori. And, between those elements of the TV shows and Hori's own character, there are these, sort of punctuation marks in the film of oddities and strangeness that works, I think, really well with the lo-fi, the very minimal presentation. And I think those moments of punctuation work well because there's such a big dynamic contrast to what the movie is normally doing. Most of it is pretty simple investigative work. And while what they're investigating is haunting, and I think it's effective atmosphere, having those like spikes occasionally of such strange things like Mitsuo Hori covered in, aluminum foil and his house covered in aluminum foil, talking about the ectoplasmic worms and whatnot. It's not an overly shocking film, but it's the dynamic range from the fairly mundane and kind of dread-inducing to just the strangeness. And I think it's a testament to Shiraishi that the film feels like more than a simple collection of, haunted apartments and baby cries and yarn loops and pigeons, mysterious drawings, The end product, I think, is quite haunting and well worth a watch. Next is Occult. Koji Shiraishi interviews the survivors of an indiscriminate attack at a sightseeing resort and starts investigating the strange events that have happened. This one opts the documentary aesthetic even more by having Shiraishi himself play an important part, a main role in the film as one of the documentary filmmakers. It even actually features a cameo from Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who is another well-known Japanese primarily horror director. And this one's a quieter, more understated film. This one works less in the oddities realm. It's pretty straightforward. It generally relies on dread and curiosities surrounding just this one character, Ino. He's a man who survived the attack that's alluded to in the plot summary, and afterwards he's claimed to experience what he calls miracles, things like UFO sightings, hearing voices. The documentary crew found out about this and wants to have him carry a camera around, hoping to capture some of those events. Occult is much more straightforward, a little plainer, pretty slow, but sort of, slow burn, slow accumulation of dread over the course of the film. We're following this man with, his morbid goal, with an uncertainty about how serious he is about it, how capable he is of accomplishing it. He's very unconcerned, and, some people are disarming in their lack of concern. This man is arming in his lack of concern. He is a walking red flag in everything he does. To me, that is the element that really sets me on edge as I'm watching this film. the specific character that is painted is one who is unnerving in a very deep sense to me. We spend a good amount of time following him, but this is also an investigation movie. We've got his stuff. We've also got the main team with Shiraishi himself doing the investigation, following clues, following signs, runes. You know, the film certainly is a slow burn, but I think it probably uses the worms the best of all these 4 films. And I mean, honestly, I think Act 3 is just fantastic, the way it wraps up and the way it uses everything. Great worm usage. Next is A Record of Sweet Murder. A murderer in the middle of a killing spree enlists a reporter to interview him as he prepares to finish sacrificing his victims to his god. Again, same deal, found footage documentary. This time, here's the twist. The film is one shot, and it is also mostly one location. The film centers around the question of whether, you know, this main character, Yoon Ji-wook, is sane or not. Whether he's, you know, just some psychopath who's murdering people, whether he's actually serving some kind of, you know, Lovecraftian entity or not. In the meantime, you know, he's rambling about his philosophy and his goals to this reporter he's recruited. There's some fights, some other people get involved. It's a whole deal. It's an impressive one-shot movie. It's not just a conversation. There is a lot that happens. And, you know, once again, this might not sound like all that much in and of itself. It sounds like a simple premise, but this is more towards the Noroi spectrum, where there are punctuations that really drive the point home, I think, that are really responsible for a lot of the escalation of tension. You know, it's a lot more explicit than Occult is. The punctuations in this film are less oddities and more demented, I would say, than Noroi is. It's not a super gory film. It's just kind of it's more disturbing overtly than Noroi was, than Occult was. This film is a lot shorter. I think this clocks in at like 83 minutes compared to the almost 2 hours of the previous 2. So if you want something a little tighter, a little more action-packed, this one might be more up your alley. Again, great usage of worms. The worms, I can't show what they are because that's an important part of the movie. Worms are great, used super well, maybe second best worm usage. Last is The House of Sayuri. I saved this one for last because it is the most traditional of the 4. It's not found footage, it's not a documentary, it is a haunted house movie. It has more production value behind it, probably more of a budget, I would assume, and it allows him to show a different aspect of his filmmaking ability. Something I think is very interesting about the first 3 films is how well he works within these constraints of found footage and of this mockumentary style. So here, it's nice to see a contrast with what he can do when given, you know, a more traditional film grammar. This is about a family that moves into a house but discovers that it is haunted by a murdered girl. I think it's worth knowing beforehand that this film is a lot of things, a lot of tones. It goes from, you know, deadly serious to a little bit goofy, kind of straight up absurd humor to kind of, you know, sickeningly depressing, all the way back around. I mean, it really does try to accomplish a lot of things. It does so pretty well. Personally, I think the straightforward traditional haunted house elements are the best parts because I think there are some truly great horror moments in this film. At least that worked well for me. The fact that it's a roller coaster and that it doesn't go off the rails completely at any point, I think is a testament to his filmmaking. So, you know, we've seen, like I said, Shiraishi working within the constraints of found footage. Now that he can expand a little bit, and this is not like his first non-found footage movie, there are others, of course. I'm just picking this one. He's got, I think, some great camera creativity, especially, is a strength. I like the, you know, shot motif of looking down from the balcony on the kitchen table. We get that a bunch. It's always good. Even the mundane stuff, conversations, I think, are fresh. They have nice, fun setups that are unique. Doesn't get stale. It's just a well-directed movie visually. There are other parts of the direction I'm not a huge fan of, but I think it's cool to see flexibility in a director, be able to see the skill of adapting to multiple different kinds of movies, multiple different environments. And then, of course, in addition to enhanced budget camera work, the film's got worms. The worms are awesome. Fun scene. Won't show too much of it. I showed it a little bit in the opening. But this might be the, I mean, these are, you know, there's a little more budget. The worms look a little better than some other times, but, you know, they're still a little iffy. The visual effects in this movie are fun, but they are not sophisticated. In summary, the takeaway from the 4 films, I think, is that I respect his ability to make films with restrictions that, you know, like the circumstances, whatever leads him to create movies is not hindered by just budget. You know, found footage is sort of a punching bag in the horror community for pumping out like a lot of low effort, unremarkable films. And that's not unearned. There are a lot. But, you know, even within his small little niche, I think he shows good versatility, you know, in the style, in the tone, and the length of the films. Even in his one small subgenre, he shows a lot of creativity. And I think that's really admirable to be able to create an identity, and the fact that he can do it in something so limited and also in something a little more expansive when he opens up to a more traditional film, I think is very appreciable. And I enjoy his work, and I hope a few other people can enjoy it because of this video.